Imagine being the most feared man among Christians, and years later becoming the greatest symbol of faith in the Roman Empire. This is the radical transformation of Paul, from a hunter of Jesus' followers to one persecuted by the greatest empire in history. In times when a single word could cost your life, Paul dared to defy the order, facing prisons, shipwrecks, and even Emperor Nero, the most wicked of them all. How many times have you felt discredited, judged by your past, or trapped by old choices? In this video, you will discover how one man's courage forever changed the destiny of the Christian faith, and how his story can still impact your life today. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our videos about life in the Roman Empire. And now that you've gotten a glimpse of the atmosphere and the key characters, how about we find out how Paul went from the deepest hatred to the most inspiring faith? The time of Saul, the relentless persecutor. At the beginning of his journey, Paul was known as Saul. He exuded threats against the followers of Jesus and carried with him the authority of religious leaders to hunt Christians in their own homes. At that time, his stern face and austere gaze conveyed determination and faith in traditional Jewish law. His robes were similar to those of the masters of the law, yet stained by the fervor to administer justice against what he considered a dangerous sect. Saul witnessed the stoning of Stephen, one of the first Christian martyrs. Although he did not throw the final stone, he kept the executioner's garments and approved every act of violence, causing Christians to fear his arrival in any village or town. His reputation grew among the Pharisees, and soon he found himself traveling to Damascus, carrying authorizations to arrest anyone daring to follow the way, as they referred to the teachings of Jesus. He believed he was serving God, yet, deep down, he harbored an unease. If so many people were ready to die for Jesus, who truly was this man? With his mind numbed by duty and honor, Saul walked without realizing that his steps would lead him to an encounter that would change a course of history. Do you want to understand how such a fierce persecutor was transformed by the very Christ he fought against? The conversion on the road to Damascus. On the way to Damascus, under the scorching sun of the east, Saul had a vision so powerful that it knocked him to the ground. An intense light, brighter than any flame, completely enveloped him. He heard a voice in his own language calling his name, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" The figure was Jesus, directly confronting him. In that instant, everything Saul believed crumbled. He experienced literal blindness that symbolized his spiritual blindness until then. Led by his companions, Saul arrived in Damascus without his former arrogance. He agonized for answers, and even though he could see nothing, he understood that Jesus, the very one he had relentlessly pursued, was real and alive. It is at that moment that Ananias, a man of faith described as having kindly features and modest attire, enters. Even though he feared Saul's reputation, Ananias obeyed a divine vision to visit him and pray for him. When Ananias laid his hands on Saul, it was as if scales fell from his eyes. The restoration of his physical sight came accompanied by a change of heart. From then on, Saul became Paul, beginning to understand that his mission had been reversed. He was no longer meant to destroy, but to build communities of faith. The once stern and threatening man was now a humble learner, ready to delve into the new message. How do you think this newly converted man was received by the early Christian communities that once feared him? The introduction to the apostles and Barnabas' support. Even though completely transformed, Paul faced distrust. Who would believe that the greatest hunter of Christians was now preaching about the same Christ? Barnabas, known for his warm heart and an appearance that inspired confidence, was the first to extend a hand. His garments, though simple, featured a woolen cloak typical of the colder regions, a testament to his constant travels. With encouraging words, Barnabas helped Paul be accepted by the apostles in Jerusalem. At that time, Jerusalem under Roman control was a bustling city. Pilgrims, merchants, and soldiers shared the sacred spaces. Imagine Paul traversing the narrow alleys, glancing cautiously at every corner, as many still did not trust the sincerity of his transformation. However, Barnabas spoke on his behalf, introducing him to the Christian leaders and attesting to the signs of genuine conversion. Gradually, Paul began engaging in debates in the synagogues, surprising listeners with his deep knowledge of the Jewish scriptures. What he once used as a weapon to condemn Christians now became proof that Jesus was the promised Messiah. Yet the city remained tense, and Paul's growing popularity aroused the anger of former allies. To avoid a fatal confrontation, his brethren suggested that he leave, thus beginning his future missionary journeys. Do you think Paul would find acceptance elsewhere, or would he face even greater dangers? The first missionary journeys. Departing with Barnabas, Paul embarked on journeys that would take him to various cities: Antioch, Iconium, Lystra, among others. In these places, he encountered populations with different dialects, customs, and religions, ranging from the worship of Roman gods to Greek philosophies. Barnabas, with his warm demeanor, opened the doors, while Paul, with his logical reasoning and serious expression, presented the messages of faith. In every locality, there were challenges. In some cities, Paul and Barnabas were warmly received. In others, they were nearly stoned. The simple, worn garments from their journeys reflected their unwavering commitment to spreading the word even amidst persecution. Paul's face became known both among the converts and those who saw him as an agitator. During these journeys, Paul developed an expertise in reconciling different cultures. He spoke with the Gentiles as equals, without abandoning his Jewish identity. In a short time, churches and groups of followers sprang up everywhere, laying the foundations of active communities that supported one another. The success of these journeys earned him allies, like Silas, younger yet equally dedicated, and also attracted more powerful enemies. Do you want to know how Paul handled the religious resistance in Jerusalem, where all the tension converged? Get ready for an electrifying twist. Conflicts in Jerusalem and Agabo's prophecy. As Paul's fame spread, opposing voices also emerged. Returning to Jerusalem meant facing directly those who had once given him the authority to persecute Christians. It was almost a reunion with his past. As he walked through the city's alleys, now as a preacher, he encountered looks of astonishment and hostility. Many could not handle his radical transformation. Amid this context, the prophet Agabo, known for his direct messages, appeared. Dressed in simple pilgrim clothes and sporting a long beard, Agabo approached Paul and, in a symbolic act, tied his own hands with the apostle's belt to announce that Paul would be arrested by the Jews and handed over to Roman authorities. Forewarning of difficult times that shook even his closest friends. Even with the warning, Paul insisted on staying true to his mission. He was willing to lose his own freedom and even his life if necessary. Once again, the loyalty of Silas and Timothy proved unwavering as they remained by his side, convinced that if it was God's will to bring Paul there, it must be fulfilled. The tension grew each day on the streets of Jerusalem, with whispers of conspiracies and divided crowds. Have you ever wondered how these prophetic warnings could change not only Paul's destiny, but that of the entire empire? If you're enjoying this content, leave your like now and share your thoughts in the comments. Would Paul's arrest really occur as Agabo had foretold? And how would the Roman Empire react? The arrest and the beginning of the trials. Agabo's prophecy soon came true. Paul was recognized by Jews from other regions who accused him of preaching against the law and the temple. A tumult arose outside the temple where enraged men grabbed Paul, dragging him out and demanding his blood. Through the stone corridors, the sound of running sandals and exalted shouts echoed along the ancient walls. It was the swift intervention of Roman soldiers that saved him from an immediate lynching. The Roman officer, finding the commotion peculiar, detained Paul and decided to take him into custody to investigate the accusations. The narrow streets of Jerusalem, filled with political tension, became a powder keg ready to explode. But under Roman law, Paul had a trump card: his Roman citizenship, which prevented him from suffering summary punishments. Days of uncertainty followed. Roman authorities took him to Caesarea so that Governor Felix could assess the case. Even while imprisoned, Paul took every opportunity to preach to the guards and anyone who passed by, turning every cell or courtyard into a stage for his message. The experience in prison, far from silencing the apostle's voice, inspired him to write letters that circulated among the new communities, reinforcing the faith of those who feared imperial power. How would Paul defend himself before governors and kings amid growing tension against Christianity? Felix, Festus, and the appeal to Caesar. Before Felix, Paul presented his arguments clearly and respectfully. He explained that his beliefs did not go against the law, but rather fulfilled it through Christ. Felix, dressed in luxurious Roman governor attire, seemed more interested in receiving bribes than in uncovering the truth. The trial was postponed numerous times, allowing Paul to remain imprisoned while still actively ministering from within the walls. After 2 years of stagnation, Felix was replaced by Porcius Festus. This new governor inherited Paul's case. Wanting to appear favorable to the Jewish leaders, Festus asked if Paul would agree to be tried in Jerusalem. Suspecting a deadly plot, Paul exercised his right as a Roman citizen and appealed to Caesar. This surprised everyone. The apostle demanded to be heard by the emperor himself. Meanwhile, King Agrippa and his sister Bernice visited Festus, curious about the man who had caused so much commotion among Jews and Romans. Paul, displaying a calm demeanor and wearing his simple prisoner's garments, had the chance to explain his story, from his conversion to his determination to speak of Jesus. Agrippa's attentive eyes showed interest, yet Roman politics seemed to outweigh any personal sympathy. How would Paul reach Rome, and what would be the risks of a sea voyage through turbulent waters? The dangerous voyage and the shipwreck. Escorted by Roman soldiers, Paul boarded a ship bound for the empire's capital. The Mediterranean was notorious for its unpredictable storms, especially outside the safer sailing seasons. Initially, everything went smoothly. A gentle breeze, the steady rhythm of rowers, and calm seas. However, Paul warned of potential disasters when sailing during a dangerous period, even though the centurion preferred to follow the ship owner's advice. As the waters began to churn, a violent storm nicknamed Euroaquilon struck the vessel head-on, casting it adrift. For days, the sun and stars vanished beneath dense, dark clouds. Desperation seized both prisoners and sailors. Paul, already experienced in the challenges of missionary life, remained calm and motivated everyone to hold on. He affirmed that God had assured him he would reach Rome to bear witness, promising that no one would lose their life. After a long struggle against the sea, the ship ran aground near the island of Malta. Some swam, while others clung to pieces of wood until they reached the shore. The local people, dressed in rustic furs and cloaks typical of ancient peoples outside the Roman sphere, welcomed the shipwreck survivors with a bonfire. While tending the fire with small branches, Paul was bitten by a viper, yet he suffered no harm, impressing everyone. Once again, his faith remained unshaken, earning respect even among strangers. Could Paul finally reach Rome? And more importantly, how would he be received in the empire's capital? Arrival in Rome and house arrest. After several months, the weather cleared, and it was possible to resume the journey on another ship. Paul, Silas, and Timothy, along with soldiers and other crew members, headed for the Italian peninsula. Rome stood majestic, with its marble buildings, imposing statues, and paved roads. It was the center of the world at that time, where cultures and riches from various regions mixed under the banner of the Roman Empire. As a Roman citizen, Paul was placed under house arrest, a kind of partial freedom under the escort of soldiers. He could receive visitors and preach, which he did with admirable energy. People from various parts of the capital came to hear him recount his conversion and the significance of Jesus. The man who was once stern and grim now radiated warmth as he taught and wrote letters, some of which were destined for the churches he had founded during his journeys. In this phase, Paul's missionary work reached another level. Even while chained, he had access to both Roman soldiers and civilians. Everyone who entered his home or encountered him on the streets saw an elderly man with an increasingly grey beard, clad in worn garments yet exuding a firm presence. However, tragic events were about to unfold, something that would shake the foundations of Rome and put Christians in great danger. What could threaten the safety of Paul and the Christians in the capital of the empire? The answer involves fire, conspiracy, and the fury of an emperor. The fire of Rome, Nero's persecution, and Paul's demise. On a summer night, devastating flames consumed parts of Rome for several days. The city, largely built of wooden structures, became a hell of smoke and desperate screams. Many blamed Nero, who had extravagant plans to renovate the city and build his luxurious Domus Aurea. Feeling the pressure, the emperor sought a scapegoat. The Christians, viewed as outsiders and suspicious for not accepting the Roman gods, the persecution was immediate and violent. Christians were dragged into the streets, locked in dungeons, and executed in macabre spectacles. Paul did not escape this fury. His house arrest was revoked, and he was taken to the dreaded Mamertine prison, a damp and gloomy dungeon without windows, reserved for the enemies of the state. There, with his health weakened and his age advanced, he awaited a trial that was known to be biased. However, Paul did not falter. Until his final days, he continued to write and encourage the faithful in various communities. In the end, Paul was sentenced to decapitation, a less humiliating method reserved for Roman citizens. His walk to the execution site was witnessed by a few Christians who secretly paid their final tribute to the apostle. Tradition holds that he remained steadfast, head held high, accepting his fate with the same faith that had driven him since Damascus. And so, the life of the man who once terrified Christians came to an end, but his message became immortal, crossing empires and reaching hearts to this day. Paul was not just a man who changed his mind, he was a cornerstone for the growth of Christianity. In hostile lands upheld by ancient Roman laws and customs, amid personal dramas, dangers, and persecutions, his testimony survived the passage of time. His legacy, engraved in letters and memories, echoed the strength of a love that transcends boundaries and inspires courage in the face of adversity. If you enjoyed this journey and want to continue exploring the stories of the Roman Empire, subscribe to the channel, leave your like and share this video with your friends. Help us bring more people to know about this exciting chapter of the past. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where we will continue unveiling fascinating secrets of our ancient history.